There's a consequence in sound. A Shakespearean tragedy that started straight out of New York with a rivalry between two labels that came to a dismal end in California. Legendary rap artist Tupac Shakur was gunned down in Las Vegas on September 7, 1996, at the age of 25. 6 months later, Christopher Wallace, aka Biggie Smalls, or the Notorious B.I.G. met the same fate in Los Angeles on March 9, 1997, at the age of 24. It was a cruel extermination of hip-hop's elite, leaving everyone with the same question: who killed Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls? Was it rivalry? Was it greed? Or was it a conspiracy? We talk about the paranormal aftermath. Both artists had an eerie obsession with death, but have they come back in the afterlife? What famous stars have claimed to be visited by these legendary rap artists? And do they haunt the locations where they were slain and where they have worked? This is the true crime and paranormal aftermath of Tupac Shakur and Christopher Wallace, the Notorious B.I.G.
Person out there, don't forget about that clicking up thing, you know what I mean? Be to yourself, stay to yourself, trust nobody, my closest friends did me in. My closest friends, my homies, people I done took care of their whole family, I done took care of everything for them, looked out for them, put them in the game, everything turned on them. Fear is stronger than love, remember that.
Hello, welcome to Hollywood Paranormal. If you're just tuning into our podcast for the first time, hola.
Welcome.
Hello. Stay with us. Love us.
Yes.
Love us, please.
We're needy. We need things.
I know. And if you're just tuning back into our podcast, welcome back.
Welcome back, friend.
We're your host, Tammy Merhab Chavez.
Hello, I'm Bryce Mitchell-Williams.
And welcome. So you heard it on the intro. We are going to be talking about the true crime and paranormal aftermath of Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls, a.k.a. Notorious B.I.G., a.k.a. Christopher Wallace, because when you're in the rap industry, you need more than one name, right?
I think that's the first rule.
That's rule number one. I don't know the rest of the rules.
Me neither. No, zero.
Bling bling, Cristal. We have Cristal here.
Yes.
It's the po man's Cristal because we do not get paid for this podcast.
No.
So we thought outside the box and bought like a bottle of $8 Andre champagne.
Classic. I love it.
It was very classic. Look, it won an award, so it's pretty close to the real thing. So we're going to be pretty much talking about the background of hip hop, how it started, the origins. We're going to take you through a little historical trip throughout California and New York, the Bronx, Harlem, Manhattan, and in California, Compton and Watts, and how both styles of music came about and how these two individuals began their stardom.
Yeah.
So first off, because Bryce has stated before in our last episode that he's white.
Yes. Who better, I think, than a gay white boy to talk about Tupac and Biggie? I think I really...
It don't matter.
No, it does not.
It don't matter. Plus, you're from the Midwest, too, and there's some Midwest rappers.
One, and we excommunicated him immediately. No,
Who's
I don't
that?
know.
No, you got Nelly, you got
Yeah.
Bone Thugs, and you have the biggest one. You have Kanye.
We have Kanye.
You're like,
Great.
well, I mean, I guess if you consider him.
We barely claim him. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding, Kanye.
He named his daughter after the city that he was born and raised in, Chicago.
Oh, bless.
Chicago West. Imagine if he was from a random town in Illinois like Kickapoo or Assumption.
I would also not be that surprised.
I'm going to name my daughter after Kickapoo.
I mean, sometimes you just got to do what you got to do.
Yeah. He would still make money off of that name, regardless.
100%.
Or even Assumption. Assumption West. Just imagine that.
I actually like that more than Chicago. Is that weird? Assumption?
Really?
Yeah, I don't know. That like has a nice ring to it. Dear the West family.
Dear West.
As avid listeners of our podcast.
Here's an assumption. So here we go, guys. All right, we're going to start out with a little history because I am a huge fan of Tupac Shakur. I remember being in middle school and being introduced to his music and also Biggie's music, and where I was when we heard the news of both of their deaths. And I remember even in school, like my friends and I would always like trade albums of a lot of the West Coast and East Coast artists. So I'm a big music fan in that sense. So we're going to walk down memory lane and go through several decades of what was going on in California and New York, and also give you a little lesson. And it's just my opinion on the differentials of West Coast and East Coast music, because that's very important.
Yeah.
All right, guys. So during the 1960s, there is racially charged tension throughout the nation during...
I had heard that.
Right? So, it's all due to the civil rights movement.
Right.
So we see the rise of the Black Panther Party, the Brown Berets, and of course, Malcolm X Federation. And in California, we had a huge riot in Watts, California, and this occurred in the late 60s. And this happened all throughout, this time period. Then we transition to the 70s. So we slowly start to see the birth of gangs such as Bloods and Crips in the West Coast and other criminal elements such as street gangs in New York. So they were exploding in number and beginning to support themselves with a large scale of drug dealing. And they're mainly doing this in, little urban areas. Mainly the Bronx. Not to mention, there was a huge arson epidemic that occurred in the Bronx in 1977 during the World Series between the New York Yankees and the LA Dodgers.
Ugh.
So already there's beef between East Coast and West Coast because of this baseball game. People freaked out because we lost. The Yankees lost.
Oh, okay.
And it was a big ordeal in the middle of the game. Someone called something out and people just didn't agree with it, so the Bronx was burning.
Oh.
Yeah, so you had that occur. Then the Bronx becomes a bankrupt city filled with abandoned buildings. There's poverty, and it's no thanks to the mayor that was, in office during that time. However, throughout this chaos, from the ashes comes this little phoenix. This is a little urban movement known as hip hop. It began to develop in the Bronx, New York. It focused on emceeing over breakbeats, house parties, and neighborhood block party events held outdoors. So its biggest pioneer was a group called Sugar Hill and the Gang. If you do not know them, stop this episode right now and listen to them, please. Please.
That's the only excuse we'll take for not listening to us.
I know. We'll wait. Hold on.
We're just going to wait.
Welcome back. All right.
That was a very fast listen.
So the origins of West Coast hip hop trace back also to the mid 70s in LA. We have Alonzo Williams, a young DJ from Compton, California, and he began to DJ parties at various venues in Southern California under the name Disco Construction and the Wrecking Crew. I know. Hold up. Disco Construction's going to throw some beats.
I love it.
I know. Pop, drop, and lock it. All right. So 1980s comes in. We see a huge increase of the number of gangs. All the ideas at this point of the Black Panther Party, the Brown Berets, even Malcolm X Federation, is completely lost, is out the door. The gangs were exclusively focused on territory, crime, and drugs. So the beginning of the crack epidemic only worsened in effect. We see cocaine just being sold like hotcakes. So as the influence of gangs spiraled out of control with the introduction of drugs, circulating in areas of New York, California, even Florida, the early 1990s saw some of the highest homicide rates ever.
Wow.
We even go through a huge moment where we have the LA riots due to the Rodney King beatings. This is all occurring. So it's tension filled in California at this point. But throughout this whole chaos, we see another form of music occur. We see the birth of gangsta funk or G-funk with this little group from Compton called NWA.
Oh, those old so-and-sos?
Those all so-and-sos. There's a little movie about it, Straight Outta Compton. I don't know if you heard it. Which was a good movie, by the way. I liked it.
Oh, so good.
So yeah, that's pretty much the history of, you know, how this type of style of music came about throughout all this chaos in both coasts.
Well, I think it's so crazy how big a part the city itself and all of, especially the Rodney King and O.J. Simpson, all of those things that we've already talked about, but they really were like active members of the development of this music. I mean, when we say Rodney King, like that's just like a throwaway thing, but it is like the living, breathing fuel of that time period because people were so angry, and rightfully so. It was horrifying what was happening.
It was horrific.
And like you said, Phoenix Out of the Ashes is the perfect metaphor because it was just such a shit show at the time, and they had one option.
Yeah, and throughout all this chaos, I mean, these individuals, NWA came out with, you know, Straight Outta Compton, and it just, you know, took off from there. People had a voice, and, you know, it was them, and it was amazing. Some people disagreed with it, but other people were like, you know, no, you didn't grow up in this area. You don't understand what we went through, what we see on a daily basis. So we're going to go and take a little, you know, educational break with some music here. Drop some little street knowledge on you. Now, I am a big fan of both West Coast and East Coast. So I'm just going to go over the players and of both West Coast and East Coast, and just my opinion on what differentiates between the both of them. So West Coast, you have Dr. Dre,
of course,
Snoop Dogg, Ice Cube, Eazy-E, Kendrick Lamar, Cypress Hill, Ice-T, Nate Dogg, rest in peace, Exhibit, DJ Quick, Warren G, and The Game. In the East Coast, you also have Notorious B.I.G., Nas, Wu-Tang Clan, A Tribe Called Quest, Run DMC, Queen Latifah, Kool Moe D, Busta Rhymes, Onyx, and DMX. Not to mention, too, Tupac Shakur falls on the category of West Coast because he, you know, adopted the West Coast and loved it. He even wrote a song about it, To Live and Die in L.A.
Yeah.
In my opinion, this is just my opinion, West Coast has G-Funk style. Their lyrics are more abrasive, has more of a hard style nature. The beats are hard-hitting as well as the delivery of the rhymes, as opposed to the subtlety that is typical of East Coast artists. So you have East Coast music with the deep drum beats and their laid-back, complemented style with old-school influence. And the artists prefer to ravel their messages within intricately put together lyrics filled with these unique double entendres. So that's just my version of what I feel is the, you know, is the difference between both West Coast and East Coast.
Cool.
And if you listen to both Tupac and Biggie, you can follow through like, oh, you know, his beats sound a little more laid back, where Tupac, he sounds a little more abrasive.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But before we touch on the crime and the deaths of these legendary rap artists, we need to get to know them as people and not just as victims. Yeah. Where they came from and where their rise to stardom began. So we start with Tupac Shakur. Tupac Amaru Shakur was born on June 16, 1971 in East Harlem to a former Black Panther activist, Afeni Shakur, who had spent time in jail while pregnant with her son. She chose the name because it meant shining serpent in Incan. I know, very deep. Afeni once said in prison, quote, "My son is going to save the Black nation," unquote. Tupac grew up in the Bronx, New York, and even though they were poor, Afeni made sure her son was bright, well-mannered, and most of all, educated. If Tupac was ever out of line, Afeni would make him read the New York Times from front to back, and while her son really never enjoyed it, it made him very aware of the world around him at such a young age. Wow. And that was the thing with Tupac, you know, he was very well-spoken and very well-educated. Every time you see him in an interview on video, like, he, like, has fucking great delivery, great vernacular, and he just, like, looks you in the eye and is, like, very direct. Wow. So growing up, Tupac really didn't have a male influence in his life. His father was barely in and out of the picture, being in jail. His godfather was convicted murderer Geronimo Pratt, who was serving life in California. Closest to a father figure to young Tupac was Afeni's former lover, a man nicknamed Legs. He was a small-time drug runner and dealer for a Harlem drug lord. With a nickname like that, of course, I mean runner. Why not Legs? Wow, very...
really on the nose.
I know, on the nose there, I know. So money was tough, and Afeni struggled to find work. However, education was priority. And while living in Baltimore, Afeni placed Tupac in Baltimore School of the Arts, but before then, she even enrolled Tupac in the Harlem Theater Troupe, where he starred in a play, A Raisin in the Sun, at the age of 13, and that performance was held at the Apollo Theater.
Whoa.
So he was bitten by the acting bug at the age of 13, and it became his refuge. He even stated in an earlier interview, through acting, I could become somebody. The streets were too much for Tupac and his sister, so Afeni sent both of them away to stay with a friend in Marin County, California over the summer. You see, Afeni was hiding the fact that she was a crack addict. And she hid it for a very long time, but it didn't take too long for young Tupac to find out. When he found out, him and Afeni had a huge falling out. He ends up moving out while still attending high school, but he ends up living in an abandoned apartment complex with a few boys, and he starts to write poetry and deliver pizzas. But he still attended high school. He was still chasing girls, writing poetry, but the money wasn't coming in. So he takes on a different venture. He decides, I'm going to go ahead and sell crack cocaine. So he sees a lot of profit in that, but he realizes instantly that this is something that he doesn't want permanently in his life. So he continues to go to school, but at the last minute, he drops out. He's like 2 months away from graduating.
Whoa.
He's 2 months away, and he decides, no, I'm going to drop out.
No.
I'm going to go to L.A. He goes to Los Angeles due to an invitation of his mother's friends, where he briefly worked in youth groups. He liked working with the youth groups, but he didn't like the politics involved, so he quits and decides to write music. He pursues a career in music, and there he meets up a group by the name Digital Underground, or DU.
Whoa.
Bryce, do you know any of their songs?
No, I just recognize the name.
Okay,
I just thought that, like, I want to start writing music. Here, Digital Underground. Oh,
done.
okay. Great.
Their claim to fame was the song Do the Humpty Dance. Do the hump, do the hump. Do my babe. Do you remember?
I do know that song. I would not have known that's too. I'm terrible at this.
You're not that white.
I play this game where people are like, "What? Would you know this song?" I'm like, "You don't understand. I was not allowed to listen to music until I was out of college." Like, I'm not exaggerating. Like, the first, I think, hip hop that I ever heard, I was at least 23.
Stop it.
I cannot.
I'm gonna have to make you a playlist.
Yeah, great. Yes, please.
Introduction to hip hop and rap.
Now, if you want to talk about Amy Grant and her Christian music career, then yes, I am your guy. But
I've been there.
Yeah.
I've heard some of her songs.
So I have heard of that song, the Humpty
Right.
Dance. I would not have known that was who it was by.
Yeah, so it was by the Digital Underground, and Tupac Shakur was a part of that group. So he is signed on the spot with them.
Nice.
He starts off as this. He starts as a roadie and then a backup dancer, and then he decides to ask them, "Hey, give me a chance on the mic." They're like, "Okay." So at a concert, he gets on stage, he drops some lyrics, and his presence is instantly like recognized. And the talent that he had, it just got him noticed immediately. So he continues to record tunes. He finally had enough for an album. He begins working on getting his music released. But one of the problems that Tupac faced was the sterilized happy rap that DU was putting out. Gangster rap was coming on the scene, of course, with artists such as NWA making a huge impact in the music community. Before Tupac restyled himself for the rap scene, he was casted in the film called Juice. Director and producer Neil Moritz once said that Tupac will be a big star within the next 10 years. However, Tupac's response to that was, in 10 years, I'm not even going to be alive. So he already knew. Eventually, Tupac Shakur became a household name by producing several albums such as Tupacalypse. Now, strictly for I'm not going to say it because it's a little bad. So All Eyes on Me, Me Against the World, and my personal favorite, Don Illuminati and the 7 Day Theory. It's one of my favorite albums of his. In the midst of all his fame, he eventually meets a 6'3", 350-pound of a mountain of a man by the name of Marion Suge Knight.
Oh.
You read Harry Potter, right?
Yeah.
He's like the Voldemort of the rap world.
He really is.
He's really no bueno.
No.
He's really not good.
No.
He's not good at all. So then that transitions me into Christopher Wallace, which is Biggie Smalls. So a little rundown on Christopher here. Christopher Wallace was born in Brooklyn, New York, May 21st, 1972, as the only child of Violetta Wallace, a Jamaican preschool teacher, and Solon George Latour, a Jamaican welder and politician. His father left the family when Wallace was only 2 years old, and his mother worked 2 jobs while raising him. He grew up in Bedford, Stuyvesant neighborhood, surrounded by drug dealers and gangs. It didn't take long before Wallace was in a gang. So already these 2 individuals, they didn't grow up with a father figure. They were, it was a really unstable household, and their mothers were, either too busy working or raising children, and it was just too much for them. So Wallace received a nickname, Biggie Smalls, because he was the biggest one in his gang. In an interview, he was asked, "Who were your heroes growing up?" His response was, "Hustlers were my heroes," during his early years. So Biggie was pretty bright. He excelled in school. He ends up transferring from Bishop Longland Memorial High School to attend George Westinghouse Career and Technical Educational High School with future rappers DMX, Jay-Z, and Busta Rhymes. They also attended there at the time, and according to his mother, Wallace was still a good student, but he developed a smart-ass attitude at the new school. Wallace was 17. He became a drug dealer. During a drop, he was arrested and given 9 months and then was later released. But in jail, it's the place where Biggie started to record and write his own songs. So he eventually asks a friend to borrow a 4-track tape recorder. So this is after he is let out of jail, and he begins to record demos in his basement where he lived. He was still dealing drugs in order to support his daughter, Tiana, from a long-term girlfriend back in the day. So, but once Biggie had good sampling of his music, he began to distribute the tapes to local radio stations where his music was played on the radio, and came to the notice of a young, upcoming music producer by the name of Sean Puff Daddy Combs. Oof. I know. So it was Sean Puffy Combs that gave Christopher Wallace the nickname the Notorious B.I.G. because, like I said before, once you're famous, you need more than one.
Yeah.
So Sean Puffy Combs worked with Wallace on covers of Mary J. Blige, Real Love, and What's the 411, alongside a very popular single, Party and Bullshit, that was featured on the film soundtrack, Who's the Man? Notorious B.I.G., now on the road to stardom with Puffy Combs at the helm of his debut album, Ready to Die, under the Bad Boy label. So he was under the label with Sean Combs, Bad Boy, and Suge Knight was under Death Row. But Suge Knight was also trying to get Tupac to sign. But Tupac was like, no, I'm going to stay here. So everything was perfect and on track for Biggie. However, on August 4th, 1994, Wallace married R&B singer Faith Evans after they met at a Bad Boy photo shoot. 5 days later, Wallace had his first pop chart success as a solo artist with a double A-side, Juicy Unbelievable. Big eventually wins Best New Artist and Rap Performer, as well as Lyricist of the Year, all within the same year.
Whoa.
Biggie's lifestyle was changing, and the one thing that didn't change was his desire to help friends and his ability to not forget where he came from. Biggie always remembered the hard streets and those who helped him out, especially during his troubled times. Now, it was during his troubled times that he met another hip-hop star who would forever be linked to better or for ill, and that is Tupac Shakur. So real quickly, we're going to go into their friendship. Now, according to Medium.com writer Eric Donaldson, he writes, their friendship begins in 1993. Biggie would meet Tupac on set of Poetic Justice in Los Angeles. Now, during this encounter, it's been reported that Pac was playing Party and Bullshit over and over again on the set, which was flattering to Biggie.
Aww.
So it was his first single, and Pac was already an established name. Biggie Smalls was like, oh my God, this guy loves my single. The two hang out at Pac's home, also in LA, and they just shoot the shit. They smoke. Wallace even says, I always thought it would be, it was like a Gemini thing. Biggie said to Vibe magazine. We just clicked off the top and we were cool ever since. So Pac was pretty much Biggie's mentor.
Wow.
Since Tupac was giving Biggie, advice for being, more of an experienced rapper at the time. So he was, pretty much his Yoda, just kind of maneuvering him throughout this industry. The advice would one day come back to haunt Tupac, though. Oh. At the same time, Suge Knight was busy trying to get Tupac to sign with Death Row, but so far he wasn't able to get Tupac to sign with them. So Tupac was trying to live it up or down depending on your viewpoint on his, gangster reputation.
Sure.
He had been in and out of trouble with the law for quite some time, and it came to a boiling point with sodomy, rape, and even weapons possession charges that sent his ass to court. So it started when a 19-year-old girl said that she had sex with Tupac and then was later assaulted the next day by members of his entourage in his hotel room while Tupac was passed out in the room next door. While awaiting the New York trial, Tupac received an anonymous text from a number to come down to Quad Studios in Times Square to record another track. So the studio was going to pay him $7,000, and Tupac was desperate since he needed money due to the trial. There were fees, there was attorney fees, everything. So he gladly accepted and agreed upon it, even though he had no idea who sent him the message. He went to Quad Studios with his companions. They paged the intercom outside, and they were relieved to hear a familiar voice that they recognized over the speaker. They thought, oh, it's probably an associate of, Biggie. So they figured it must have been, one of his friends or manager, maybe, Sean Puffy Combs. Maybe it was him that sent the message. Tupac and his entourage walked into the building. They approached the elevator, and right then and there, right when they were about to press that button, two young black men appeared with pistols, and one called out, "Don't no one move." Everyone hit the floor. Tupac stands his ground as his friends drop to the floor. When the two gunmen saw Tupac still standing, one of them said, "Shoot that motherfucker." 5 shots rang out, and Tupac was hit in the head, hand, and testicle.
Oh my God.
Ouch.
Yeah, I know. That is not a good way to spend a studio session.
I know. Imagine being shot in the boob. To me, I feel like that would be the pain of being shot in the testicle. But yeah, I mean, that's so much for your, studio session.
Oh my God, that sounds terrifying.
So the gunmen robbed Tupac and grabbed as much of his jewelry and money as they could. They run out the door as Tupac was being loaded into the ambulance. Biggie Smalls and Sean Puffy Combs finally exited and graced everyone with their presence.
Oh my God.
As they were leaving the elevator. When Tupac saw them, he flipped them off while mouthing the words, "Fuck you." Tupac was then convinced that Biggie Smalls and Sean Puffy Combs had planned a sabotage on him. His immediate thought was that they wanted to rob him and kill him. Now,
God.
the biggest question is, why? Competition. Some claim Biggie wanted to be number one and the king of hip-hop. It was no spot for two people. He wanted it. Soon, Tupac spends 1.5 to 4.5 years in prison. After he goes through his trial, he is still bandaged up. He's in a wheelchair at this time trying to recover. And while in prison, he finally makes a deal with the devil or Voldemort. Suge Knight, comes to visit him with the lawyer, and they sign the agreement. So this segues us into the media and how it interfered with this whole beef between the East Coast and West Coast. And then we'll go into the deaths, unfortunately.
Spoilers.
So, I know, spoilers. I mean, you had some thoughts of how the media interfered with this whole entire beef. What was your thought on it?
Well, it's like an overarching kind of umbrella thought in that I think we could all point to examples of when the media wants to sell stories.
Yeah.
A good way to do that is to sensationalize things or to aggrandize things or to carry things out longer maybe, or you know what I mean? I think at the end of the day, when we live now in an entertainment news era where you want to get the news, you want to get the facts, journalistic integrity,
right?
Those are still true, and I think we see examples of that. But at the end of the day, subscription and viewership and profit matter, if not more, than at the very least equally. I think more, but definitely equally to the truth. And so I think in this case in particular, what sells really good newspapers? An East versus West feud. It's already built in, like you were saying, like the baseball rivalry, the gang rivalry, just in general. There's like pizza rivalry. Like every big city, like Chicago, New York, LA, all of them kind of jab at each other. And so I think it's built in what sells more papers. adding fuel to the fire of the Biggie Tupac rivalry. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I think it seems very odd that they were such good friends and then so quickly such like staunch enemies. I wonder how much of that was true and how much of that was like blown out of proportion. I don't think they got along very well.
Right.
But
I don't know. I felt like they did get along pretty well. It's kind of like that high school feud where you have like, you know, two friends, they're really good friends, and, you know, one goes off to hang out with the popular crowd and the other one's left behind and goes off and to make friends with the other, you know, crowd. And then all of a sudden there's all these rumors of he said, she said. And to me, I felt like the media had a lot of influence between this, like the both of them. And second, the people that they were around just dropping all this stuff in their ears. Their entourages were the worst human beings on the planet, in my opinion. Oh, the entourages are the worst. I feel like that whole case, the rape case, I know that they had something to do with that.
God,
I don't think, in my opinion, I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know if he did something to this girl or if it was just the entourage. But I remember even when I worked in my glamorous days of retail, when I was working at the Beverly Center in Beverly Hills, there was this huge A-list star that came in into women's ready-wear. And she had like a group of her entourage with her. They were loud, obnoxious, and rude. Absolutely rude.
Oh, the entourage, in my experience, they're always the worst.
Yes.
I've never met, like, oh, that group of friends is really nice. I'm like, ugh, they are leeches.
They are.
They're entitled.
That's all they were. They were just complete leeches.
They are the ones, sometimes, like, right, you hear these stories of, like, celebrities being crazy or whatever. But in my experience, it's the people around them riding the coattails that are the most entitled, that are the rudest, because they haven't done anything. Yeah. Usually the celebrity, they've worked. They're the product, if you will. So they're still doing the actual thing that they love. And then they bring people with them and they're not doing anything. And they're entitled and they're mean because of it's the worst. Don't be that person. If you're in an entourage, get out.
Don't be.
Or whatever. I don't know.
It's not benefiting you, trust me.
Or if you need someone in your entourage to be entitled and mean, I will do that for you. Whichever you need. It's fine.
Bryce would do a really good job.
I'm so good at being entitled.
Because he's graceful as fuck.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Well, according to 2fab.com, Unsolved stars Dominic Santana and Waze Jones, who portray Tupac and Biggie in the USA series. They stated there was no East Coast versus West Coast until the media got involved. It was people at Bad Boy and people at Death Row who had issues with each other. And then the media seized in on it, Santana told 2Fab. Then other people at home watching got involved. And it's like, well, screw the East Coast. And then they were like, well, screw the West Coast. And the media was like, yeah, freaking ratings. Jonas echoed his co-star's sentiment, adding, the media played a big part in it because they just seen what they seen. And they just said, well, this is something good to report on. And they just went out and made a big scene about something. He further goes on to say that he believes the individuals involved could have let cooler heads prevail if they had given it a chance. Sure. They could have came together and they could have squashed that whole thing, but it was just too blown out of proportion to where they never had the opportunity, he quotes. So this beef does continue. It just continues on to 1996. In June of 96, Shakur released Hit 'Em Up, a diss song in which he claimed to have had sex with Biggie's wife, at the time estranged. This is Faith Evans, and that Wallace copied his style and image. Wallace referred to the first claim about his wife's pregnancy on JC's Brooklyn's Finest, where he raps, if Faith Evans, his wife at the time, has twins, she probably have two Pacs. Get it? Like two Pacs. However, Wallace did not directly respond to the record during his lifetime, stating in a 1997 radio interview that was not his style to his response.
Wow.
Yeah, kind of crazy.
That's so awkward.
It's very, very awkward.
So awkward.
It's very, very awkward. And I remember yesterday sitting here with my husband while it was raining, because in LA, when it rains, you just stay indoors because the whole city is...
We will melt or fall into a mudslide.
Shut down.
It's the worst.
So we were just like binge watching YouTube videos, music videos. We were watching a bunch of Tupac videos. There were some Tupac videos where they had an actor portray Biggie.
Whoa.
And he's just dissing him in the video. It's insane.
I feel like there is still some of that, but like that era in music especially was very like, if you're doing something that is a personal offense to me, or B, that I find like kind of reprehensible, prepare to be in a song or prepare to be in a music video, because like that was their... And, you know, we still sort of see that sometimes with these like feuds and Twitter, but it's so watered down comparatively.
Yeah.
I mean, those early, like, blasts, essentially, were so brutal. Just like, oh, this entire song is about you.
This entire
now
video
it's like, this tweet
is
is
about
about you. Like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm fine. Thanks. I'll see you in 140 characters. Like, bye. But, like, a whole song, like, on live TV, like, or radio or whatever, you know what I mean? Just so pointed. And, you know, we're talking about these genius level wordsmiths.
Yeah.
Fire. Just insane.
It was. It's very insane. But you also have to understand too, Tupac, I believe he was 25, 24, 25, and Biggie, I mean, they were all in their mid-20s. They were kids. They were kids. You know, they were kids that were fighting against one another. No one wanted to like drop the flag and, you know, call it truce.
Sure.
We had other people that, you know, pretty much, you know, slipped a lot of words into their ears.
Sure.
A lot of words, a lot of money, Cristal, Hennessy.
A lot of Cristal.
I know.
I
know.
I hate when that happens.
All right, so the beef continues. And it continues some more. And then all of a sudden, we hit tragedy.
Yes. So let's just transition right in.
Yeah.
So Tupac was the first victim. In September of 96, he was in Vegas with none other than our good friend, Suge Knight. Voldemort. You know, sometimes you just gotta like hang out with Voldemort. So he and Suge Knight and their group of friends, their whatever, a lot of the people from the record and like their entourage are in Vegas. And they go and see a pretty big boxing fight. It was Mike Tyson and Bruce Seldon.
Yeah.
Which at the time was like the fight, essentially.
And it was a fight that lasted like seconds.
Yeah. Let's do a different boxing podcast, because that's a whole
different...
Every time I'm like, boxing? Oh, fine, whatever. But yeah, so it was like, you know, how those title fights are.
Yeah.
And after they see essentially someone that they have a lot of beef with, Orlando Anderson.
Right.
And they essentially jump him, and Tupac specifically attacks him and like punches him, and they're like yelling and they're fighting. And that is sort of the first domino in the series of the rest of the night. And so that fight is actually caught. There's like hotel surveillance footage of the fight, and it's like pretty violent.
It's very violent because one, they see the guy who, I guess Anderson, it was all due to like robbed or stolen jewelry.
Right.
And these guys, testosterone, masculinity, they're coming from a fight.
You just saw the fight.
Their adrenaline is all pumping. They're like, "Oh, we got to continue this fight."
Yeah. And he was allegedly, Orlando Anderson was allegedly a gang member from Compton. So this is like, again, somewhat
gang-related,
old beef,
yeah.
gang-related. Like, again, all of this is interwoven. So you really can't separate the music from the violence, from the gang. Like, it's all this, like, big conglomerate of, like, existence, basically. So they've beaten him up. My favorite is that in the Wikipedia article, it's like they beat him up in a Foot Locker. Like, of all the places, not a Foot Locker is nothing sacred. I love it. Well, just a little snippet.
Oh, Wikipedia.
Some color commentary there. And so then they return to the club, the 662 or Club 662, which essentially was like their home base in Vegas, basically.
Yeah.
It's like a reservation only front, more or less.
Right.
So they were headed back, and the traffic essentially, which is such a silly thing to get stuck for, was terrible getting away from the fight. Just everyone's in the street trying to get to the next party or whatever.
Yeah.
And so their entourage gets pulled over. They don't have any like license plates displayed. They have them in the car though, so they're let through. It's just like this sort of weird series of like, they're stopped, then they're stuck in traffic, then a traffic light goes out, they can't get through. So this like convoy of like 4 or 5 cars can't even get through the city, essentially, which then becomes their death trap, because there's cars that are able to pull up and they're leaning out the windows, they're talking to women that are passing, inviting them to the club. Tupac allegedly specifically is like out the sunroof, like all of these things, which like in hindsight you're reading, you're just like, oh no, you're like setting yourself up.
I know.
But like, why would you think anything of that? And so one of the cars that pulls up then opens fire. And so this is the thing, is that it's all normal until it's not. And so there's cars pulling up, they're screaming, cheering, like excited to see Tupac, all of that. And then the car pulls up and opens fire. And Tupac is hit 5 times, I believe, in the chest, in the thigh. One punctures his lung. And then the car itself gets flat tires. Yeah. And Suge Knight is actually also injured, but he's driving the car and is able to drive Tupac to the hospital. Yeah. So this then starts the sort of whirlwind of not only speculation, but chaos, because there's so like little that's being done. And that sort of starts the like, well, why weren't they searching for the gunman immediately? Why wasn't Tupac rushed to the hospital by like an ambulance? Why didn't they call the police right away? All these things that like
all these questions,
all these
were
questions
just
in hindsight, but at the time there's no real thought, I think, behind it. I mean, that's just purely my speculation, but that shock takes over and you're like, we got to get to the hospital.
Yeah, it's pure adrenaline. First they got off of a fight, and then Tupac gets shot. I mean, you don't know where your mind is. You're just like trying to figure out, okay, how do I get him to safety? What do I do?
And here's like the crazy part. Obviously, this comes out much, much later, so we're going to jump ahead and then we're going to come back. Yes. But the person who allegedly shot them is Orlando Anderson. So the person that they beat up is now getting revenge, whatever it may be. He ends up being the gunman. They don't know that at the time. He actually ends up not even being one of the main suspects, because the police question him for like a laughably short amount of time and let him go. He then like confesses years later, after like
way after the
statute of limitations or whatever it ends up being. Yeah. But at the time, it's like, oh, did you do it? No. Okay, bye. Like, great, good for you.
It was great. It was like a great 5 minutes.
Insane to me. Like, especially like he's on footage being. He has like the motive, and they don't keep him for
They just ignore it.
Okay, so my commentary on police work aside. So he does. Tupac is taken to the hospital, and he actually doesn't. It's not like he dies right away. They have to sedate him and put him in a coma because he keeps trying to get up because he's so angry.
Yeah, it's like he's still moving. He wasn't killed instantly.
No, which is crazy. They had to remove a large chunk of his lung, and he was still trying to get out of bed. He like is so fueled by the like anger and the revenge. So they end up putting him in a medically induced coma just to keep him in bed. Now, part 2 of the speculation: why keep him in a coma? Who
authorized?
Yeah, exactly. All these things. Like, well, if he was like well enough to be getting out of bed, why would you need to put him in a coma? Like all of these things that are just outside of like quote normal protocol, but like literally he had to stay in bed and he wouldn't. So all that to say, he ends up dying. Spoiler again, my bad. Because of let me see if I can find it. I wrote it down somewhere. Because it's not from the bullet wounds technically. Well, I'm never gonna be able to find it, but he essentially dies from like medical complications.
Yeah,
like 5 days later.
5 days later, his body just like gives up.
Yes.
I think his body was just trying to recover, and it just gives up. Let's see, his body he was claimed to be, it was cremated.
Yes.
Members of his old band Outlaws made a controversial claim that they even smoked some of his freaking ashes.
Allegedly,
in honor
they
of him.
mixed his ashes with marijuana and smoked it.
Jesus Christ.
But then I think it came out later that it wasn't actually his ashes or something.
Good.
It's still very creepy. Don't smoke your friends. Like, if there's one takeaway
like the
from this,
chemicals in there. I just could imagine.
Don't smoke your rap legends. That's, I think,
don't
the
smoke
takeaway.
your friends. Smoke them out, but don't smoke your friends.
That's the takeaway. So then this again starts the sort of speculations. Even though Suge Knight was in the car, there's a lot of speculation. He's under a lot of pressure. There's a lot of people that were saying that Tupac was trying to get off of his label, essentially.
Yeah, he was trying to break contract, and he was like, nope. But he was noticing, too, like, money was not coming in. Suge Knight kept his money. I think he even Tupac fired his attorney. And
yes,
Lord knows how that could have, like, really ticked him off.
Yeah, so all of those things, this is, like, essentially seen as an isolated incident, super tragic. Everyone's, like, in shock because, again, like you said, they're children. I mean, Tupac is 25 at this point. Like, to be that on top of his game and then so brutally murdered is, like, so shocking. Everyone is, like, not able to process it. So, in this sort of, like, chaos, Biggie is sort of accused. People almost immediately start saying, this has to be Biggie. There's such a feud between them.
Right.
There's such a beef between them. So essentially, Suge and the Notorious B.I.G. are like the two
main
suspects.
It's like it too Biggie or it too Suge.
Yes. So Sean Combs, I'm doing this thing. Sorry, I keep like looking at you and like blanking because I'm doing this thing where their rap name and their real name are flashing across my like.
There's a lot of names. Remember,
so many names
in this industry, you have more than one.
I need a chart essentially. So I was getting ready to say Puffy and then Sean Combs and P Diddy, which is all the same person. Again, have I mentioned how white I am?
You're very white.
Yeah, it's the thing.
It's very white.
So he actually produces documents that, in essence, exonerate Biggie because he was recording essentially, and there's
he
records.
Had an alibi.
He had an alibi, exactly.
Yeah.
There's some question as to how legal those documents are. There's no date stamp. There's no time stamp.
Right.
They could have been produced at any time. There were witnesses, but they were questionable. They were all like members of his family. So there is still some speculation, but Biggie is essentially no longer the lead witness because of these documents that Sean Combs produces. So again, people really want there to be a feud. Want it, I think.
Yes.
That it was Biggie because that's like the perfect Shakespearean feud is like that he killed him. Technically, he's exonerated. So they're just allegations at that point. And then we flash forward to March 9th, the next year. A mere 6 months later.
Yeah.
And we're in this beautiful city of Los Angeles.
Right.
And the Notorious B.I.G. is also murdered.
He's gunned down.
Gunned down.
Same way.
In almost an identical way, which is just so crazy to me. But they are in Hollywood, essentially doing a promo tour for their upcoming album. And they are leaving for an after party. They were... that was being hosted by Vibe, which we've already mentioned, which is such a, important like part of the story is because they were so on the pulse of like everything that was happening.
Yeah.
So they're headed to this party, and again, the traffic is terrible. They are being stopped. They can't get through. Again, an entourage of cars.
It's a mess.
It's
the same mess. Yeah.
It's the exact same
so
thing.
Odd how it parallels.
Yes. And one of the bodyguards who is supposed to be sort of in charge of like his security is actually having to drive a separate car because they wanted another car in case they wanted to bring people with them to the hotel.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's just these like 1 degree outside of normal protocol. Mm-hmm. And in hindsight, it's like, oh, what are you doing? Like, why did you do that? But at the time, it's just normal until it's not.
The one night where things are not going as planned or should be going as planned, this happens.
So again, almost the exact same situation. They're sitting in the SUV entourage. They're stopped on Wilshire, and a car pulls up. And this time, the shooter's not known, so there's no flash forward in this one. Mm-hmm. It shoots again, and Biggie dies. And they try and save him. He was hit 4 times, and they rush him to Cedars-Sinai, and they perform, and he's pronounced dead that same day. So he doesn't have quite the same
longevity as Tupac.
It wasn't quite as unsure. It was pretty quick after that he was pronounced dead. Later that next morning. Mm-hmm. And so sorry, what was I going to say? Oh, and so this basically, again, I keep bringing it up, but this is now the next domino of people like, wait a minute, this is too similar.
Yeah.
Why does this feel so familiar? Weren't we just here 6 months ago? How is this the same exact thing? And instantly people think of Suge Knight because it's too similar. And the main sort of concern is that because Biggie was exonerated in Tupac's death, a lot of the heat shifted to Suge Knight. And what one of the main theories of that is that in order to get the heat off of him, he had Biggie killed.
Yes.
So then it's this
big
web
conspiracy right there
of like the main theory is that Suge was mad at Tupac. Mm-hmm. That he wanted off the record label. Mm-hmm. Suge Knight has a history of violence.
Oh, yes.
He's the worst person. If he's listening to this podcast from prison, please don't kill me. But then the sort of rumor mill that starts is that he allegedly killed Tupac, and to get the heat off of him, he had Biggie killed in the same way. Mm-hmm. Because there's no way to trace it, he essentially hired like gang members to gun them down.
That was the thing about Suge that I definitely want to press on. You see, because it starts with Pac's demise, it sets in July 96 when a crew, like I said before, snatched a death row pendant from a blood named Trayvon Trey Lane in a Lakewood mall in Compton. So there's this huge fight. 2 months later, Trey was with Tupac and Suge at a Mike Tyson fight, and then the shots ring out. Tupac is then killed. And it's all because of this jewelry. It's all because of this little piece of jewelry. That's, in my opinion, that's what started it. But according to a May 1997 issue of Vibe magazine and a story by Rob Marriott, the report detailed of how Tupac's slaying Bloods launched a full-out war in Compton's Crips. Suge's henchmen told other Bloods that Tupac's killer was Keith D's nephew. According to Compton police affidavits, when the bullets stopped flying, 13 gangsters had been shot and 3 were fatally passed. So already there's more people dying because of this, of his death. Now, there are no easy answers to the myriad of questions surrounding Tupac's death, Marriott wrote after the harrowing experience reporting from the streets of gangland Compton. But it has become clear that the streets of Compton were controlled primarily by Suge Knight. And according to writer Jesse Washington of TheUndefeated.com, Washington states that the web was real. At the center was the tarantula Suge Knight, who, according to evidence in books such as Murder Rap and Labyrinth by Sullivan, ran death row like a mafia boss. And it's true. Suge Knight was the Mickey Cohen of the 90s and early 2000s. He had gangs under his payroll. He had crooked LAPD cops under his payroll. If you really if you really want to get involved in this case and learn more, read Murder Rap, read Labyrinth. It's spelled like L-A, Branith, but those are the 2 best books I've come across because they really take you to the dark underbelly of L.A., of crooks, gangs,
and
everything.
That's the thing that's so crazy is that specifically, like, both are pretty poorly handled.
Yeah.
But with the murder of Biggie, there's almost no investigation.
There's none.
It's so mishandled by the police.
It's
so questionable their actions. And
the reason why it's mishandled, it's because based on Labyrinth, the main reason they never solved his case is because politicians didn't want to. They said the powers that be had to let them know that the city didn't want another OJ style circus.
And so here we are again.
Media, they didn't want a media circus once more.
Like we're in this thing where LA is on, essentially we're always on the verge of a riot. Like it's just so crazy, but the fear of that happening again is so real. And like the palpable and demonstrable ways that the city tried to avert a repeat of the Rodney King riots is so crazy. And then with the O.J. Simpson, and it became such a circus constantly. And I think this is such a silly tangent, but they do a really good job of showing that in The People vs. O.J. Simpson.
100%.
How terrified they are
100%
of riots happening again. I mean, it's
regardless, it happened.
Yes, and it did. And so now here we are twice removed, and they're fearful of the riots. They're fearful of the media circus, and they really just pave this over. No, we're not going to dig into that. We just want to move past it because they don't want to deal with that in case they have a repeat.
It's true.
So it's just completely neglected, essentially.
It is. And it's so sad because, I mean, there are several lives lost. And it wasn't just like Tupac and Biggie. Other people lost their lives. Other gang members lost their lives, but they're still lives. Another second theory, this is what I heard. Believe it or not, Biggie's Ride or Die BFF, Sean Diddy Combs, was also suggested as one of the people behind his death. The theory behind Diddy being responsible for his best friend's death is that as the head of the record label Bad Boy Entertainment, he wanted Big's upcoming record sales to skyrocket. As reported by Business Insider in March 2017, the report also claims that even Big's mom, Violetta Wallace, believes that Diddy might have been involved somehow. Ooh. I believe in one of my theories. This is one of my theories about him. I believe Suge Knight was the perfect playwright, and this was his play. He wanted to control everything. He wanted to control Tupac and, probably off him and off Biggie. Maybe he conspired something with Sean Combs because, I mean, if you think about it, how come Sean Puffy Combs wasn't, one of the targets too? It seemed like he was kind of like on the sides.
And that is the one thing too, is I think where the Suge Knight theory falls apart a little bit is like logically, like what are you're gonna hire someone to shoot up a car that you're in?
And that's what my husband brought up. He's like, why would he put his life on the line that way? But it's Suge. He's crazy.
He's very crazy.
He is what my mom would call it crazy.
And I think too, there was so much chaos happening that hypothetically he thought he wouldn't be in that car. It's hard to say because a snake will always act like a snake. So you're like, well, maybe he didn't know, or maybe he wasn't doing it, but it's just, you can't really expunge his tendencies, you know what I mean? So it's like, I don't know, maybe he would put himself in the car to look innocent. Like, who knows how far he was willing to go?
Yeah, I felt like he really goes far.
Look at us just wildly speculating.
I know. Well, I was telling you before too, you know how like fucking shady he is? There was this interview with Jimmy Kimmel. It's on YouTube, guys. I'll see if I could put it on our show notes. It's insane. Suge Knight is one of the guests. He sits down, they have a little icebreaker, and then I think Jimmy Kimmel asks him something about like, who killed Tupac? Who do you think killed Biggie? And he's like, well, some of the speculations say that I was involved, but there are different ways of killing a person. And Jimmy goes on to ask him, oh, really? What are the ways? Oh, silent ways. Injection with AIDS. We all know that Eazy-E died of AIDS, right? I was like, oh. Shut up.
Yeah, that's insane.
It was like Jimmy Kimmel, like if you wanted to see Jimmy Kimmel sweat, that was the episode. Like, what do I do with my hands? He was looking at the camera, smiling, laughing, nervously, insane. But for him to say something like that,
well, it just goes to show how untouchable he felt.
Oh yeah,
like, I can say this. I can, in essence, confess, if not to a murder, to the knowledge of how murders were committed. And he's untouchable, not completely because he's in prison now, but that's his mindset, clearly.
Yeah. Not only that, he refused to give Afeni, Tupac's mother, any of the royalties of his songs or anything. And I know she tried to take him to court as well. But, I mean, it's still a mystery to a lot of people. But, I mean, what are your final thoughts of it? Like, the whole thing.
Well, so then that's the other thing is that a lot of people, because of back to don't smoke your friends, once it was revealed that the ashes were not Tupac's that they smoked, then this other theory starts that he actually never died, that Tupac was still alive, is still alive.
Oh, my God. He is still alive. He faked his death. He's living in Cuba.
I think, were you the one that showed me Kim Kardashian?
Kim Kardashian posted something in 2012, 2013 that she swore that it was Tupac working at a bank. It's like he flashed before my eyes, like many of my marriages. They just flashed before my eyes.
Bless. So yeah, I don't think that I would go that far. I think he did die. I think he's not alive.
No, he died.
But I think, what are my final thoughts? This is a hard one because it's such a sticky web of like police, either corruption and negligence, and then like this weird feud. My guess is that if Suge Knight wasn't the perpetrator, he at least had some kind of knowledge of what was going on. I think he took anything that he perceived as an insult incredibly personally. So I think the fact that Tupac had come to his label because Suge offered to pay his bail and then wanted out, I think he, would have taken that incredibly personally. Do I think that he is the only one involved? No. Do I think that he definitely was a major player? Yes, 100%.
Yeah. He was the playwright that led the play, in my opinion. I mean, my final thoughts is Tupac. This whole thing started out with stolen jewelry. Tupac beat up a killer who then killed him all over a piece of jewelry. Tupac chose to live and die by the rules of thug life.
Yeah.
And if you remember it from the movie All Eyes on Me, you know, the acronym for thug is the hate you give. And, you know, I think one of my best friends, he put it so well, Thomas DeLeon, if you're listening, I'm giving you a little shout out because Tim and I were talking about it too earlier, and he put it so well. He says, you know, he preached brotherhood camaraderie, but he was also quick to glorify the thug life. His music was a reflection of his struggles growing up and overcoming the odds. But, you know, he acted like a thug. And like he said before, you know, through acting, I could be someone. And he chose to be a thug. He chose to portray the you know, thug gang life. And with Biggie's death, I feel like it was a bit of a conspiracy.
Yeah.
I felt that many people were involved in that.
Of the two, that one definitely is
that
more
one is a little
conspiratorial.
more. That one's murky.
Yeah.
That one's very, very murky, in my opinion. So, I mean, it's still an ongoing process.
Sure.
Unfortunately, in May of 2016, Afeni Shakur passed away due to complications of a cardiac arrest. But yeah, she was only 69, so she's now joined with her son. No, it's really, really sad. But, well, now this segues us into the meteor part of the podcast, guys.
Yes. I love asteroids. Sorry, not the right kind. Okay, here we go.
So we go into the paranormal aftermath of of both of these cases. Now, here we go.
Talked about unfinished business.
There is a lot. You know, in a lot of these podcasts that I listen to, they talk about the crime, but with us, we're going to talk about a little bit more of the paranormal aftermath of everything, because, you know, when something traumatic happens, something's always left behind.
Yes.
So let's start with Biggie Small.
Let's start there.
Let's start with Biggie. So some claim that Biggie's spirit has been seen on occasion outside of the museum where he was shot, and his death may have caused an imprint in the area surrounding the Peterson Automotive Museum. And what I believe is that type of residual type of haunting, I think that whatever was left there is just
that
repeating.
Energy.
It's repeating. So that energy is repeating due to that residual type of haunting. Now, that's very common with murder victims because, yeah, like I said before, Biggie was gunned down while driving his SUV, and one wonders why his spirit is still seen wandering around the sidewalk out in the front. I know.
Oh, that is, I mean, it's like you said, that's such a traumatic event So I wonder if it's not even like his spirit, but the energy of that final moment.
Oh,
that's just on
100%. I feel like that could be it.
Yeah.
According to Brian Clune of Hollywood Obscura, another place that Biggie's often seen is at the recording studio in New York where he recorded most of his music. Now, there has been many reports over the years that it has become an urban legend in its own right. The studio has even called ghost hunters to try to find out what it is that Biggie Small wants and to hopefully allow him to move on. On more than one occasion, musicians and/or singers will be in the process of recording when a voice from nowhere, out of nowhere, will call out to them on their headphones, distracting them enough to ruin the track that they are working on.
I would die. No, absolutely not.
Bye. Can we reschedule in a different location?
If while we're recording this podcast, someone talks to me in the headphones, I'm leaving. Like, no, I've warned you. Like, no, I will not. No.
You would leave. I would be like, let me grab my phone and let me investigate.
I would literally just like put the headphones down and walk out. I'm like, I'm not doing this. Absolutely not.
Before you leave, you'll grab your Starbucks.
Yeah,
You're
well,
like,
yeah.
Excuse me, hold on. Bye.
Priorities. Come on. That's terrifying.
Isn't it? It's been documented. Like, you could find it online.
I wonder if that's a similar situation. Like, you're pouring so much of yourself out when you're creating artistically.
Oh,
that
sure.
must have left some kind of imprint.
He loved music. He loved recording. That was his refuge right there. So another famous rap artist and ex-flame of Biggie Smalls is Lil' Kim. Now she...
Plus.
Oh my God. Have you seen her lately?
What's left?
Oh. I don't recognize her anymore. She's 50 Shades White. Like, it's insane how she eerily tries to resemble herself as Faith Evans in a way.
Yes.
Because she's completely blonde and very pale.
Yeah, it's very weird.
It's very, very weird. So Lil' Kim has claimed to have been visited by Biggie Small's spirit. The rapper had come to her in dreams for a while, but when the movie about his life came out, titled Notorious, was released, it was then that he was frequently visiting her in her dreams to complain. So Kim said in an interview to Rap Radar that Biggie was not satisfied with the film Notorious, but that he has love for everyone involved with the film after its release.
Oh my goodness. That is such a strange...
I think she was even a guest on one of those like reality shows of it was like a psychic, and he interviews and does the readings for celebrities, and I think she was in one of those like reality shows where he made communication with Biggie, and she was just, well, you could tell like she was trying to produce tears, but whatever's left on her face, like, couldn't produce it.
Yeah, that just seems like don't eat pizza before bed. Like, no.
But she feels that she still does sense Biggie around her. She still communicates with him in his in her dreams, and yeah, that, you know, he just wasn't satisfied with the film. Well,
who is? That's the one I'm gonna maybe not believe, but the other one's sure.
Well, there's another star that has claimed to have seen and has been visited by another ghost. So we go into Tupac Shakur's paranormal aftermath. According to a 2016 article in RollingStones.com, Kendrick Lamar saw Tupac's ghost. Now, acclaimed rap artist and activist Kendrick Lamar, who is amazing, by the way, I love his work, claims to have been visited in his sleep by the ghost of the legendary Tupac Shakur. Lamar spoke of the incident to Homegrown Radio, recalling how Shakur's silhouette came to him and said, "Keep doing what you're doing. Don't let my music die." The experience later, I know, it's insane, but this experience later inspired the closing song to Pimp a Butterfly, titled Mortal Man, in which he samples his real-life interview with Tupac from 1994.
Whoa.
They knew each other. Now, I've listened to Pimp a Butterfly. It's a great CD. It's a little different, but it's amazing. Now, the song Mortal Man is such a good song. Always gives me chills because at the end when Tupac says, because of the spirits, we ain't really rapping. We're just letting our dead homies tell stories for us. And it shows that Tupac is living on through Kendrick Lamar's music.
Wow.
I'm getting chills right now.
Yeah.
Like, I can't find the words to say how incredible that is.
Yeah.
But it's so true. What's also even more eerie is that Kendrick and Tupac they almost share the same birthday.
What?
Tupac was born June 16th. Kendrick Lamar is born June 17th.
Yeah, Gemini life. Woo.
Gemini life for real.
I'm also a rapper because I'm a Gemini.
You are. There you go. So, okay, you need more than one name.
Oh, well, that
You
seems exhausting.
need to be born in June. You're done.
Done. Great.
Then you got to rap. My name is Bryce, and
Yeah, I
I'm
know.
white.
That's it. Someone sign me a label. Thank you.
Done. I can write for you.
Yeah. Oh my God.
So the most recent report of Tupac's ghost. So there's a rapper, DJ Quick, in an interview with TMZ.com. He says that one day during a recording session at Legendary Studios where Tupac and Karen Carpenter recorded, and DJ Quick told TMZ that while he and Tupac affiliate Big Sky were in the Karen Carpenter room, it's named after the singer, and it's also been known to be haunted by Karen Carpenter, that Tupac made himself known. He goes on to say to him that him and Sky were just joking around during break from recording. Sky leaned back in his chair, lit a blunt, and for no discernible reason began to laugh. DJ Quick said that lights started to flicker on and off. He could hear the laugh over his headset. However, it didn't sound like Sky. It sounded identical to Tupac because Tupac had a distinct laughter. Quick believes it was Tupac since the studio has had some really strange occurrences happen over the years. You know where these studios are?
No.
They're next door to our job, Bryce. They're in the freaking. Remember in our fifth episode, our job is haunted by Charlie Chaplin. Oh, I didn't know either. And then I
knew
was
that
looking.
was a recording studio, but I didn't realize that's what they were called.
I found out that it's inside Henson's Studios. Not to mention in the episode 5, I mentioned that Karen Carpenter's ghost haunts a studio in there. It's that one. Oh my God! Imagine Tupac hitting it with like Karen Carpenter.
Yeah.
It's only just begun.
That's not gonna play. It's fine. That's crazy.
Isn't that insane? That insane?
I just didn't put two and two together. That's so.
Well, Tupac definitely did.
Math jokes.
Look, he dated everyone. He even dated Madonna.
Really?
So you know, he dated Madonna.
Wow.
If he hit Madonna, he sure is hitting Karen Carpenter in the afterlife.
Oh my God.
He is tapping that Karen Carpenter.
God. Wow. That is
They're
crazy.
making sweet music in the afterlife. Now, I even remember that the Travel Channel, the show Ghost Adventures, they did an episode in Vegas where they did an investigation at the Madame Tussauds Wax Museum at the Venetian Hotel. And during their investigation, they encountered some physical manifestations and collected EVP readings on their equipment near the wax figure of Tupac Shakur.
Whoa.
The museum is also a few blocks away from where he was gunned down. So they feel that they collected EVP readings from, Tupac Shakur because they were so close to his figure. And then they realized when they left the museum that, oh crap, the corner where he was gunned down, it's like several blocks away from here.
Weird.
Isn't that insane?
That's, yeah. Oh. No.
Now, based on both of their music and lyrics, Tupac and Biggie had an eerie obsession with death. Biggie had albums with titles such as Ready to Die and Life After Death. Tupac with albums such as Don Columinati and The 7-Day Theory, my favorite. The songs Hail Mary and To Live and Die in LA still give me chills and feels. He, in both of those albums, they're predicting their deaths.
Right.
But when I brought this up to my husband, he said, some people can carry that and run with it because they think it's eerie. But if you think about it, like they glorified the thug life, they, ran around with other gang members. So they, lived by the gun and they died by it.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, yeah. And especially as involved or interwoven with gang existence, like you would be watching young men your age die every day.
Yeah.
So I see what Charlie's saying.
Yeah.
just like that.
They
life,
knew they were like
when it becomes that normalized,
Yeah.
when you're desensitized to it, like of course you would have a short expectation for your life.
Exactly. I know, it's really sad. So this is the true crime and paranormal aftermath of Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls. We will never know who killed them. We would never know. Like,
it will remain unsolved forever.
Yeah,
in my opinion,
because no one wants to come forward. No one will ever come forward.
No.
All right, so we take it to a close.
Let's do it. Let's
All
wrap
right,
it out.
guys. So before we're going to, wrap this little, episode here, we're going to give some spiritual-based shout-outs of the week. We have a few.
Yeah.
First one is Pleasing Terrors. What's up, Mike? Host Mike Brown takes you on a terror-filled journey. The Pleasing Terror podcast features stories about haunted places, creepy history, and forgotten folklore. It's literature, true crime, and ghost stories. It's a great podcast because it reminds me of the podcast lore. It's very well versed, very well researched. Plus, Celine Dion love history and paranormal. Like, I love it when they're both like having a baby,
same.
and it's this one and Pleasing Terrace. And then the second one is my favorite. Mysterious Circumstances. Interested in the occult, the paranormal, and true crime? This is the podcast for you. Mysterious Circumstances is a well-detailed and well-researched investigative podcast that dives deep into the unsolved, and host Justin drops everything from true crime to the paranormal with an unpolished and raw pirate radio-styled sound.
Wow.
And I've been communicating with them online. They're awesome.
I love it.
They're great. And our biggest shout out, our huge shout out is to the cleaning of John Dope. John Dope. They're dope as fuck. Love this podcast. Real life crime scene cleaner started a podcast. That's what it's pretty much about. True stories from her, standpoint. Vanessa takes you behind the yellow tape and gives you a peek into her world. In our opinion, Vanessa is crime scene Bae from California, and Bae with the crime scene tape.
The triumvirate.
I know. And if you love Hollywood Paranormal, guys, we love you to subscribe, rate, and give a review on iTunes. It really helps us out a lot, and it helps us become a little more visible.
Yes.
Thank you guys for tuning in.
Yes, thank you so much. What a crazy week this has been.
This has been a great week.
Yeah.
Not to mention, we hung out with the trio, Booze and Brews.
I know. They're our unofficial shout out because they were so amazing.
They're so amazing. If you guys love beer and ghosts.
And who doesn't?
Who doesn't?
I do, that's for sure.
Go check them out. We had the opportunity to hang out with them on Tuesday night.
I bought pants for them.
That is so true.
So go listen to them. It's worth it.
It's very worth it. They are the same behind the mic and in person. Like, they don't turn off.
Yeah, I love it.
I
It
know.
was so fun. And I never go out. So
No, I know.
It was like my quinceañera. I'm coming out, buying pants. This is a big day for me.
Bryce wore pants.
It was amazing. What a day.
It was a great day. All right, guys. Keep it real.
Bye.
Always remember to stay weird. Bye.
Bye.